And we are on to video 3, finishing up question 8 for the test review for the test that will be on Friday, November 2nd. We finished answering problem number 8, but I wanted to state a little bit further. You can solve this exactly as it is. The only thing you have to be careful of, if your whole degrees are negative. We're having some trouble here when people put a negative 235 plus all these decimals over here. What I want you to do is either notice that if this is negative, these also have to be negative. So we would subtract, not add our decimals. Or just tack on that negative at the end. It makes it so much easier. Just pretend it's positive, but don't forget to put it as negative once you're finished. But that's only if we have negative degrees in the first place. Since we have positive, we don't have to worry about it. So just be careful about that. Number 9 says find the exact value of cosecant if the terminal side of theta goes through -9, that's my x, and 15, that's my y. If they give you a point, you know that's definitely your x and your y. Cosecant, I know, is r over y. It's the reciprocal of sine, something that does not start with a c. So I need r, I don't see that here. I need y, I do see that here. So if x equals -9, y equals 15, how do I find r? You could use the Pythagorean theorem or use the Pythagorean theorem that we arranged so that r was already by itself. I don't like to make your lives any more complicated, so I'm just going to go and say use the Pythagorean theorem every time. So x squared plus y squared equals r squared. When you substitute, don't forget to use parentheses. I've seen some mistakes there. So x is -9, y is 15, and that's my r squared. -9 quantity squared is 81. 15 squared is 225. 81 plus 225 is 306. So r squared is 306. That means that r is the square root of that. Oh, let's move that over. The square root of 306. Now, is there a factor of 306 that is a perfect square? Can we simplify that square root? I don't know. Let's see. I start with the smallest one. So does 4 go into 306? No, it doesn't. So I keep going. Does 3 times 3 is 9? Does 9 go into 306? Yes, 9 does. So I'm going to put this in green. Let's do this over here. So r equals the square root of 306, which is the square root of 9 times 34. And properties of square roots, I can break that up to the square root of 9 times the square root of 34. I know that the square root of 39 is 3. Just plain 3. So I'm just going to write it as 3. It's not the square root of 3. It's not, you leave the square root of 9 and drop the square root on the 34. Square root of 9 is 3. So then I figure out the square root of 34. Well, 34 is 2 times 17, 2 prime numbers. So it doesn't have any perfect square factors. So I just leave that as a square root of 34. If my r is 3 square roots of 34, or you could have left it as square root of 306. That's okay, unless I specify. I didn't specify to rationalize the square root or to simplify the square root, so I won't require you to, unless it says so. But I'm going to write it as 3 square roots of 34. So my r is 3 square roots of 34 over, and I previously said that my y is 15. Now you should always check to see if you can simplify. I see that I have a factor or a multiple of 3 on both top and bottom. So I'm going to simplify the top and bottom by 3. 3 goes into 3 1 time, so that's 1 square root of 34. 3 goes into 15 5 times, and just rewrite that. Instead of 1 square root of 34, just square root of 34 over 5. So cosecant of this theta that gets me to this point is square root of 34 over 5. Question number 10 is very similar to question number 9. It's just given to us in a different format. We are given 2 of the 3 values, x, y, and r, and we need to find the missing value. But in order to do that, we need to know 2 different trig functions. So question number 10 tells me, given that secant of theta is negative square root of 18 divided by 4, and theta is in quadrant 3, this is very important. The second that I see that it's in quadrant 3, I'm going to immediately draw something so that I refer to it again. Quadrant 3, I know that x and y are negative. So that's going to help me figure out whatever my missing value is, do I need to make it negative? Do I need to make it positive? So always pay attention to where it is. That's something that boggles people down most of the time. So pay attention to which quadrant it's in. We're finding cotangent of theta. First off, I have to figure out what's given to me. I know it's in quadrant 3. I've got that information down. I also know that secant of theta is this value here. Before I get to that, I know that in general, secant of theta is r over x, the reciprocal of cosine, what's not started with a c. So if that's r over x, and it's negative 18, square root of 18 over 4, I have to figure out where that negative is going. I know that the radius can never be negative. The radius has to be positive. So that means that that negative is actually on the bottom. And if I look at that, looking straight across, the r is on top, and I see that square root of 18 is on top. So r, the numerator, is the square root of 18. And x, the denominator, is negative 4. Notice how this coincides with which quadrant it's in. X has to be negative because it's in quadrant 3. And based on the information that's given to me, it is. Now what's missing is my y. So I need to find y. Let's draw a line here. Like I said before, there's several different equations that you could use, but they're all basically the Pythagorean theorem that's just moved around a little bit. And I'm just going to say, so that you always remember, just use the Pythagorean theorem. You won't make any mistakes. There won't be any misconceptions. Just use the Pythagorean theorem every time you're trying to find the missing value. So x squared plus y squared equals r squared. And again, when you plug in, make sure you use parentheses so we don't have any errors there. So the negative 4 squared plus y squared equals the square root of 18 squared. Negative 4 quantity squared is 16. We don't know y squared. Now the square root of 18 squared is the square root of 18 times itself, the square root of 18 times the square root of 18. When you have a square root multiplying itself, the radical goes away, the square root goes away, and the radicand, the number inside the square root, stays. So all that's left is 18. Solve for y by subtracting 16 from both sides. Y squared equals 18 minus 16 is 2. And that means that y equals the square root of 2. Now don't forget, we said that it was in quadrant 3. And over here, my little diagram tells me that if x is negative, y is negative because it's in quadrant 3. So it's not just the square root of 2, it's the negative square root of 2. Now that we have all 3 values, we're trying to find cotangent of theta. I know that cotangent is x over y, the reciprocal of tangent. My x value is negative 4. My y value is negative square root of 2. and I can simplify that. It doesn't say whether to rationalize the denominator, so I'm going to do it anyway. Let's simplify this a little bit. Negative divided by a negative is a positive, so that's positive 4 divided by the square root of 2. Rationalize, I multiplied top and bottom by the square root of 2, which gives me 4 root 2 over, same properties here, a square root times itself leaves me with just the radicand. And I can simplify that even further because both of these numbers are a multiple of 2. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 goes into 2 once. So that's 2 square roots of 2 over 1, or just 2 square roots of 2. Now, I actually wrote a lot more than I really needed to. Some of it you probably could have done in your head, which is fine. I'm just looking for this answer, but please, please, please pay attention to which quadrant it is in. If you are not careful, you will have the wrong sign here, or you may have the wrong sign. Sometimes you may get lucky and it may just work out that it's the same sign.